Hello, my name is Shwani and this is the Kali Bookworm. Welcome! Okay, so if you've been here a while, you know that we talk about books and more recently a lot about art. But today I'm here to talk to you about books because it's been a while since I've talked to you about what I've been up to in terms of my reading. And so that's what I want to get into today. I'm going to wrap up everything that I've read in the last few months, I think. And this is going to be hopefully not a long video, but if it is, that's okay because you get a lot of book recommendations. Let's go. Okay, so before you go and watch the rest of the video, I just want to take a minute to say, if you like the video, like it and subscribe to it because that stuff helps the channel reach more people who also like this kind of content and obviously helps me. So now go watch the video. Alright, so the first book that I want to talk to you about is Cleopatra and Frankenstien by Coco Mellors. I loved this book. I gave it a 5 on 5. It is a very millennial plus Gen Z sort of book. You've got Cleo, who is I think like 21, 22. She's just about finishing college and she is British. And then you have Frank, who basically is like middle-aged. He has done it all. He's American. He owns his own boutique advertising agency. He's doing really well for himself. So very unlikely pairing, but then they do get together and this happens in the very beginning of the book where there's a lot of banter, which I really loved, and they get together. Okay, except that Cleo has to leave because she's British and like 6 months later her student visa runs out. She's an artist and it's not like she's gonna get a job. And so Frank decides that he wants to marry her because he doesn't want to let her go. Because you see, they're in their honeymoon phase, they're madly in love with each other, they cannot get enough of each other, and Frank is just like, no man, I'm not going to let this woman go, and he marries her. And we are then taken into a whirlwind of their romance and their world where we're trying to see what happens in a relationship that feels very different but also very passionate. And there are a bunch of different fun characters that I really appreciated. I really liked Zoe, who is Frank's sister. She's I think his stepsister or half sister or one of those things. And she is dependent on him for money. And she's still in college, she's wild and she's fun and like she has this very New York thing about her, which I really loved. And like, in fact, that's what I loved about this book. Like the characters were so three-dimensional and they had so much character, like the characters had character. You know what I mean? I mean to say that they were not stayed. This book for me personally felt very much like, this is how like very young millennials and young Gen Z folks sound. They're confused and they're lost and they love to be consumed by passion. All of these different subjects and themes are covered in this book. So I would say please read it. I don't want to say anything more about it. If you like these sort of topics and if you like lit fic, then this is the book for you. 5 on 5. So the next book that I want to talk about is The Girl Who Drank the Moon. Now this was a lovely little standalone. Again, I really enjoyed it, so I gave it to another friend to read. I don't have the physical copy with me, but I bought it in an airport basically, and I kind of devoured it on the whole flight back to wherever I was going. Because I was traveling a lot in the last couple of months, so like I was reading quite a bit on planes as well. And so this is one of the books that I read, and this was lovely because it was exactly what I needed, because there's a lot of travel, you feel sort of out of sorts, and then this feels like a big hug. So I was really like apt for that. It's a standalone fantasy novel about a little girl called Luna and her grandmother and like people who surround her, which is like a swamp monster and a tiny little baby fairy dragon, which is so cute. I just like, it was so lovely in just its vibe that it was really endearing. You know what I'm saying? I didn't really feel like I needed to be swayed by the story or the plot or characters or anything that I usually look for. This just felt like the vibe was just right. So in any case, the story is that there's this little girl who's being raised by her grandmother. This grandmother is a witch. She has lots of magical powers and all of that, and she is raising Luna. And Luna, basically, when she's really young, this witch, this grandmother of hers, instead of feeding her starlight, bear with me, feeds her moonlight, okay? And moonlight is apparently really powerful, so Luna becomes one of the most powerful witches ever, and her grandmother doesn't know how to deal with that. Like I said, it's not so much about the plot of the story as much as it is about the vibe of this book. It's very sweet in the way it sort of unfolds, and yeah, that's about it. That's all I'm going to say. I gave it a 4 on 5. I really loved it. Go read it if you feel like a hug. Alright, so the next book that I read was this book that I actually listened to. It was called The Lonely Hearts Club by Lucy Gilmore. This one was interesting because I gave it a 3 on 5. It was good, but it was not like wow, wow, wow. So this one is about a woman called Sloane who is a librarian. She really, really loves her job. She loves books, and she meets this very grumpy neighborhood man who comes to the library. And he's just a meano, like he's just really, really mean, and for some reason she is drawn towards him, not attracted to him, no, because that's a bit creepy, but she is drawn to him, and they kind of have this like repartee, and like he's mean to her but she can take it, and normally Sloane is a very quiet personality, and she's, you know, slated to marry this kind of boring dentist, which includes like marrying into his very boring family and all of this, but she feels like that's what she's worth, and so she's marrying this guy. In the meanwhile, like I said, she meets this very grumpy old man, and this grumpy old man has a little fall or an accident or whatever, and then she goes to help him out, and then somebody else comes to help, and there are 3-4 people involved, and they become a reading club, much to the grievance of this grumpy old man. So it's a fun story. There are a few plot lines where there are, you know, character flaws that are fixed, and you know, life lessons that I learned, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it was a nice book. It's a very beach read, so if it's summer wherever you're at, which it's not here, I don't know if you can tell, but it's quite grey and cloudy for the last God knows how long. I have not seen the sun, I'm not even joking, but wherever you are at, if it's hot and if it's summery, this is one of those really time pass books that will make you feel good. So read it if you feel like it. Alright, so the next book that I read is called Artpreneur. This one was a non-fiction book. It is like a self-help-ish in that genre. I listened to it again and it was really, really, really good. I was actually very surprised by it. The book itself is about how to make art a very viable way of living. Not just to feed your creativity, but to also feed you, like physically be able to pay the bills and like be successful financially and things like that. And I just really, really appreciated all of the stuff in the book. There was a lot of advice on how to sell, how to sort of change your mentality when it comes to sales, because typically like artists don't really consider themselves business people, which I have been saying from the beginning of at least my career, which isn't a very long career in terms of the art career part of it, but I've been saying it from the beginning of this whole journey, that like if I wanted to become an artist, I would do that only if I started thinking about this as my own business, where I had my own agency and I made my own decisions and so on and so forth. And so this book really takes you in that direction, and she kind of helps you mold your mind into understanding why this is about choice, freedom, and a lot about giving yourself the independence to live successfully as an artist. How do you do that? How do you think about sales? How do you think about clients? How do you think about showing your work? How do you think about pricing your work? Very, very actionable things laid out in the book, and I really loved it. Fully recommended, 5 on 5. So the next book that I read is really fun. This one was Emily Henry's, I think, latest book. Funny story. I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4.5 on 5, I think, or maybe 4 on 5. I really, truly was laughing through it. The banter, which is always what I look for in like a rom-com sort of book. I'm always looking for good banter. If it doesn't have good banter, honestly, maybe also it's reflective of how I think of romance. I feel like if there's no banter in a romantic relationship, it's kind of boring. I don't know, but anyway, so this book is about these two characters, Daphne and this guy called Miles. Now, Miles used to be dating this woman called Petra, And Daphne used to be engaged to this man called Peter. Now, at the beginning of the book, what happens is that Peter breaks up with Daphne for his best friend, childhood best friend, Petra, who is Miles' girlfriend. Understood? And then obviously Daphne is heartbroken and she's like, what do? I don't even have a place to stay, because she's not the well-to-do person in the relationship and she's living in Peter's house. So she kind of gets up and she leaves immediately and she goes to Miles's house, because Petra and Miles used to live together. And so she literally goes and becomes his roommate, and both of them are moping the whole time because they've been in these long-term relationships and they thought it was going to convert into long-term, you know, like old age long-term, but like it doesn't. One of them even thought they were going to get married. Daphne thought she was going to get married, but it doesn't happen. And so they're crying and they're moping, and they're moping together at one point, and then the romance happens. As usual, Emily Henry handles these tough internal battles. So it's not just rom-com without like emotional battles that you know, characters are fighting. And I think that's really nice. It's a nice insert into new age romance, because as we all have learned, our sort of baggage and the problems that we come with, and everybody comes with baggage, if we don't fix that while within the relationship or before the relationship, then it's not an authentic relationship, at least in my experience. And so I'm loving that, you know, there are new age authors who are talking about these internal battles that we fight, and they're talking about it in context of romance, and it's not just about therefore riding off into the sunset or like happily ever after or whatever, because it can be that, but it has to be that if you've sort of really understood each other, and for really understanding each other, the character has to understand themselves. And so a lot of Emily Henry stories are really about that, and that's why I enjoy her romance writing. Fully recommend it if you're in the mood for romance. The next book that I want to talk about, I am so in love with, you guys. I know that I've read really great books this year. It's been a good reading year so far, but I exceptionally love this. It's probably going to be in like my top 5, if not my top 3. This is a novella. It is by one of my favorite sci-fi authors. Her name is Becky Chambers, and this book is called To Be Taught If Fortunate. I'm a huge fan of Becky Chambers and her work, and especially her novellas. They're like the perfect length, and the story is concise. It doesn't feel incomplete or too short, and it is so mind-blowingly expansive in the sense that it kind of takes you to this really cozy, lovely place, and it keeps you there for a while, and it's just such a gift, to be honest. So it is about a team of explorers, astronauts, who go into space to find different planets to live on so that humankind can sort of go on. And the beginning of the book starts with somebody writing a letter to people on Earth saying, hey, I hope that you read this. This is what is happening with my mission. I hope that I'm able to tell you these things. I hope this reaches you. So there's almost this sense of like, are these guys dying? What's going on? Why does this sound slightly ominous? Is this a mission that is failing? These are the thoughts that at least came to my mind. And so the story goes on. This astronaut starts talking about where they are, how they started this mission, and they're like, even you might even know this because you're watching me, because you sent me on these missions, but you might not, because many years have passed. I've gone to these different sort of universes and galaxies, and you might not even be the generation that is working in the office that sent me there. So I'm going to tell you the whole backstory of how we got here, what our mission statement was, what are the different sort of planets and different spaces in outer space that we've gone to, and what has happened here. And all of those stories are excellent. Fully recommend it. 5 on 5. Please read it. So the next book that I want to talk to you about is this one. This was an audiobook, so I obviously don't have the physical copy of it. It's Good Energy by Casey Means. Now this author, I watched on some kind of YouTube video. I think it was like a Jay Shetty podcast, or The Diary of a CEO. I'm not sure where I saw her, but I was really impressed by her. She was talking about metabolic health. She was talking about, you know, the shortcomings of allopathy as a medical system. She herself is a doctor. She's trained to be a medical professional. I think she's an ENT doctor and a surgeon, perhaps. I can't fully remember. She is well known now for the fact that she's kind of campaigning against how lifestyles are not necessarily optimum today. So she starts talking about metabolic health. It fully resonates with me because I have a full family history of type 2 diabetes, which according to her, pretty much everybody in the US apparently who is an adult is insulin resistant, and I am not shocked. So I was very much in agreement of everything that I heard her say in these YouTube videos. They were long and I watched them and I said, I want to hear more of what she has to say. So I downloaded the audiobook and I started listening to her, and I was like, oh my god, why have I done this to myself? Because it sounded so pessimistic. So I DNF'd this book, and it was simply because where her message was one of hope and action in those YouTube videos, this one, at least the first half, which is what I read, was, oh my god, depressing and also boring, and came from a place of privilege, and it came like it didn't feel actionable enough. It didn't feel like she had great solutions. It just felt like she was asking a lot of you. And as I read the book, I kept feeling more and more awful, and so I went online and I said, I'm going to check if everybody else is feeling like this. And I realized that a lot of people criticize this book for the exact same thing, and so I stopped reading it because I have a lot of baggage when it comes to diabetes. I lost my father to that, and I don't feel like this book had much to add. She herself, as someone who speaks about it, had a lot more to say on those YouTube videos than in this book, so I DNF'd it. I'm not going to say more about it. I've already said way more than I wanted to about a DNF book. Maybe it gets better, maybe it gets more actionable, but a lot of people on Goodreads were saying that it doesn't get actionable and it's only for like privileged wealthy people who have access to a certain kind of life and lifestyle. And I was just like, okay, that's not for me. That doesn't feel very practical, so I DNF'd it. I was on a really great streak of books, so I had to find one bad egg, and this was the bad egg. And just after that, I started reading a book called... Actually, I started reading two books at the same time. I started reading Blue Sisters by the same author who had written Cleo and Frankenstein. And then I also started reading fan fiction. It's a Harry Potter spin-off fan fiction book called... It's called Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love. I should know the title of this fan fiction book, but apparently I could not remember it. But anyway, I just remember that Draco Malfoy was very hot in the book, and the book itself was amazing. So Draco in this book, like I said, is a hottie. He's a baddie. He's amazing. So if you like romance, if you like banter, my god, there is literally nobody better than Hermione and Draco. You heard me right. This is a Draco into Hermione fanfiction romance, and it was amazing. There's a lot of smut, I'll say that, but that's only in the end. It's not through the, like, 95% of the book is smutless for the most part of it. There's just a little bit of smut here and there. Most of it is just banter, and it's so true to Hermione's quick wit and like very witty sort of repartee. And Draco's exactly like that in the books as well, and he's very sort of smart, and he has these whiplash sort of, you know, things that he says. The author has stayed true to that, and so it's so much fun. The premise of the book is that they are like 20 years older or something like that. Hermione is now a healer. She's a doctor as well. She's a medical doctor for muggles and humans. She was also a professor. She's a researcher. She's many things because she's Hermione, and she's a complete nerd, just like she was 20 years before that. She is extremely talented, and she is coming up with this cool invention that is going to change the face of medicine in a major way for the magical world. And unfortunately or fortunately, this puts her at risk because there are people who don't want to see that sort of invention come through. And so she's working on this research, and she needs protection. Who is brought in to protect her? It is Draco Malfoy, because in this fanfic world, Draco Malfoy is an author. He's someone who goes and catches the bad guys, the criminals, or as they say in the book, the baddies. And he basically is now given this job to protect Hermione 24/7. And so he goes to do it very, very unwillingly because he's like, he's not really hung out with Hermione since then, and he kind of still holds all of the resentment. They're not best friends. They weren't 20 years ago. They're not best friends now, certainly. So he's like, man, she's just such an oversmart nerd. I don't want to like work around her or be around her. But he reluctantly goes, and things happen. You like romance, please read it. It's not like cringe at all. It's very bantery, like I said. That's sort of my zone for romance, and I loved it. I gave it a 5 on 5. I would read it all the time. It's just very cozy. Things are happening. It's also very slow burn, you guys, so don't expect it to like get done very quickly. It's a very, very slow burn, not very plot, action. It's chill. It's 1,000 pages of chill romance and banter, and these little small adventures that they go on for the quest that she's on for the paper that not paper but whatever, the hypothesis that she's researching. And yeah, 100% would ask you to read it if you like that genre. You will not regret it. So the other book that I was talking about was the most recent book by the same author who wrote Cleopatra and Frankenstein. So this one, a topic so close to my heart, is about 4 sisters. I have a sister, I have a younger sister. We are incredibly close, and it's a very unique dynamic. And so any story with sisters in it really interests me, because I like to see the nuances of how other people experience sisterhood. And this was exactly that for me. This is a story of 4 sisters who are originally from New York but now live all over the world. And one of them isn't around anymore because she passes away, and the other 3 end up coming to their family home in New York under these circumstances, and their lives change forever. This author is really good with like character building and really making them wholesome and sort of examining them from every angle, looking at their baggage, looking at their insecurities, looking at what they're good at, looking at their connections in the world that they live in. And I just love it. I love how she expresses the authenticity that each character brings to the story, and I loved this book as well. I gave it a 4 on 5. I think maybe a 4.5 on 5, I'm not sure, but I really liked it. I would fully recommend it if you're a sister. Even if you aren't a sister and you're just curious about the experience, this is the book for you. So that was, as I suspected, a long video. Thank you for sticking with me, and thank you for watching the video. I knew it was going to be long because there was a long download. There was a lot of books that I read, and I had to catch you up, didn't I? So that's it from me. I will talk to you very soon in a couple of weeks. Bye.